Here we go, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Strong Life Podcast. I am on the call with my friend, Matt Beaudreau, and I've been listening to Matt, learning from him. We connected maybe 2 months ago after I was posting a lot of stuff on like the JFK fitness movement. And Matt has a podcast called The Essential 11. It's quickly become one of my favorites. I went back and listened to the older episodes, and I'm always catching up on the current episodes. And Matt is I'm not sure if this is proper, Matt. I'm tempted to say you're in the education space, but not, the conforming type of education. And so this is going to be a really awesome call. As I said, great conversation because a lot of my listeners are around my age. I just turned 46. So we have a lot of dads listening. Some of them are certainly older than me. We've got some younger guys, but a lot of people who've been following me for a while know that a lot of moves I've made in business and in life were to do better stuff for my family, which it's like you and I are long lost brothers in that
No
realm.
doubt.
So I'm excited to have you on. I appreciate your time. You're out in California currently, so we're 3 hours ahead of you here in Jersey.
Yes, sir. No, man, the honor is mine, man. And yeah, I always say I'm in the education space. I'm not in the schooling space.
Yes.
And I definitely make I differentiate between the two, but I've come out of the schooling space too. So I know the game inside and out. And again, man, taking it from the parenting side and the being the dad approach. And I know, you're just such a good guy, man. And your messages of the hard work and work ethic. I've followed your stuff forever, man. And I was an athlete for a long time too, man. So I appreciate you.
What's wild, Matt, is in one of your podcasts I'm listening, you're talking about how you were coached by Ken Shamrock. You were trying out for the Lions then. And so you and I are about the same age. So in the mid 90s, I remember my old wrestling coach, we went and rented a VHS. I think it was on New Year's Eve. We went to Blockbuster, rented a VHS of the UFC, and back then they didn't call it MMA. They called it NHB, which I explained to people was no holds barred fighting. And so coming from a wrestling background, he's like, you got to see these wrestlers are winning everything. Mark Coleman, Mark Kerr, Ken Shamrock. So I was like, all right, let's go rent these VHS tapes. And then NHB was like this thing I started getting all hyped into. And so when I researched it, if you recall, I'm not sure, I haven't followed UFC fights for a bit, but the guy would often referee the main event, Dan Miragliotta. He owned, Big Dan, they call him.
Yep.
He owned a place in Elizabeth, right near Newark, near the airport.
Okay.
And it was called BAMA, Bayside Academy of Martial Arts. And there wasn't a whole lot of instruction. So you go there, you'd learn a little Muay Thai, and then you're sparring. You'd learn grappling, not necessarily jujitsu. And now I'm wrestling everybody because I could take down people and guys were choking me and triangle arm barring me.
That's awesome.
It was
That's
wild.
awesome, man. Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, no, man. I grew up kickboxing, right? So I was into combat sports from a very young age and had done over 100 kickboxing, matches as a kid. And so I was getting ready to graduate from college and I see these guys grab. And of course I'd been following,
where did you go to college, Matt?
Chico State out here in a small state school out here in California.
NorCal. You're in NorCal.
Yes. And, I see these guys grappling in this wrestling room and I'm like, well, that looks like the UFC type stuff. What's going on in there? So I walk in there and just got my ass handed to me. And, one of the guys that was in there is a guy named Jason Peets, who's one of the original Lions Den guys. It was like him and Jerry Bolander and Mikey Burnett and Frank Shamrock, like some of the OGs, right? Guy Metzger.
Yes.
And so I became friends with Jason and started there. I moved to the Bay Area right after that. And he hooked me up with Frank Shamrock. And so Frank coached me for a long time, so I did 9 mixed martial arts fights under Frank, and including getting to do the tryout and fight on Ken's promotions. So man, good experiences. I know Mark Coleman pretty well. Got to know a lot of those guys. Good. It's a past life, dude, but it's a good experience.
Right. The early ground and pound crew, except Frank really brought the legit jujitsu.
That guy was a genius. Is a genius.
Right. the jujitsu, the shoot fighting. So shoot fighting is what
Yep.
Big Dan was teaching at
Yep.
Bayside Academy of Martial Arts, and he would host fights. And we could, this could get
That's awesome, man.
we could
Yeah,
really go
for
sideways
sure.
with
for
this
sure.
combo. But
Totally good.
so
Yeah, no, it's a
let's
great
talk
experience.
about, you've got a couple programs, from me listening to your podcast.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, again, it's called the Essential 11. And so
Mhm.
on that podcast, because you invited me on, I believe you do them on Fridays, you interview somebody who's really a leader,
Right.
doing amazing things. And then your students get to ask questions. I'm super impressed by these kids. And I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm not mistaken, is it all boys?
So the episodes you're listening to with the young men on, yes, those are all young men. And what you're getting on that is you're really getting kind of 3 worlds of mine that I run simultaneously. You're kind of getting the combination of them.
Gotcha.
Right. Because I have a number of schools that I own out here in California.
And what are those schools called again?
So they're part of the Actin Academy Network, ACTON. And people go, well, what is that? What is Actin? And the quote that Lord Actin is famous for, that most people know, is power corrupts, absolute power tends to corrupt absolutely. Most people have heard that quote, right? So this guy, Lord Actin, is the one that said that. But, so I own a few schools out here in Northern California. I'm a part of the global movement of Actin Academies. Those are K through 12s, young men, young women, but they're a vastly different school model than what people are used to. I say school because it's the closest thing people can follow. They're workspaces for young people. When I say workspaces, I'm talking, brother, we've got high schoolers making 40, 50, 80, 100 grand a year in high school. And that's part of their curriculum. So it's a vastly different model, right? So I got my schools. Tim Kennedy, who a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with. Tim
Yes.
is an old school fighter, is a friend of mine. He and I put together the Apogee Strong program, which is the mentorship program for young men only. We got young men in about 30 some odd countries. And then I've got the Essential 11, which is my podcast. And that started with a focus group of 1,500 young people, boys and girls from around the country. And we said, hey, we're going to go to superstars we've had, you name it, man. We've had Seth Godin and Brian Callen and Patrick Bet-David and Gary Vaynerchuk. And, we just got the who's who of business and military leaders. And we got Jordan Peterson coming up, Jocko Willink, right? Like some of the big names. We're going to go to them and we're going to ask them your questions, right? So we started there. The Apogee call sometimes now substitutes as an Essential 11 episode where the young men are asking them directly. So I've got all those things going simultaneously. So all my world, everything that I do pours back into building up the youth.
It's very connected to what I do because I was in teaching from 98 through 2009. And when I left teaching my business, I had kind of multiple facets of the business, kind of similar to how all your stuff intertwines. I had the physical underground strength gym. Then I had the online individual products, the membership site, the certification. I would travel. And so I had kind of all these things going on. And basically, I couldn't teach anymore. My health was getting destroyed. I really wasn't seeing my wife and daughter. My son wasn't born at the time. So I took a family leave of absence for a year. And then the business was going so well, I just never went back. Then I had some kind of in between times where I coached at the collegiate level. So Lehigh, then Rutgers. Then after I left Rutgers, I went back to the school. And now I'm at a high school, just strength and conditioning. But when I was in graduate school, Matt, I had an amazing teacher. His name was Juan Miguel. And it was my last graduate class. He would greet everybody at the door with a handshake. And we graded ourselves at the end. And I'm going to get to my grade in a bit. But one of the books that was a required reading was called Freedom to Learn. Did you ever hear of that book or read it?
So there's been a lot of iterations there's been Freedom to Learn, Free to Learn. So who is the author of that one? Do you know?
I'll look it up, but I remember the cover was like in cursive, Freedom to Learn.
Okay.
Cover was maybe like purplish color. And what I remembered about that book was these two in our graduate class, there were two older gentlemen, like late 40s, early 50s, that had left teaching. And I know you mentioned charter school. That's why I bring it up. They opened their own charter school.
Yeah.
But they were so inspired by Freedom to Learn that in this charter school, every Wednesday, the kids did whatever, like they started the year with their own project. So let's say you were into movies and you wanted to research, I'm not a movie buff, like Steven Spielberg. Every Wednesday for the rest of the year, it reminds me of like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You had to research it and then present it. And so Freedom to Learn was a teacher who I think was going through his graduate, maybe his PhD studies, and went into the inner cities of Chicago that had like the worst grades, the most violence. And then it was turned around and he wanted to find out how and why. And the how and the why was they gave the students ownership over everything. So let's say you and I were we destroyed the bathroom. We went in, we vandalized the bathroom, we ripped out toilets, hand dryers, you name it. Now you and I had to repair the entire thing. That was ours. Or let's say we were complaining that the school looks blah, there's no artwork. Well, you and I would get handed a paintbrush, and that was our project, to paint this room or to paint this hallway. Or the courtyard looks like crap. Well, now me and my 10 friends are going to go to the local nursery and buy plants and flowers. And so they gave the kids ownership. And then, so they basically went outside the quote unquote curriculum, which like, God forbid you do that, because I was actually reprimanded when I was teaching middle school for going outside the curriculum. The other thing that was cool was things like, this is an older book, I think written in the 90s. So, even back then, certainly today, they're like, don't hug the kids, don't touch the kids, nothing. Well, they said, in these inner city schools, kids were, missing moms, missing dads, or both parents were kind of strung out on drugs, this and that. Those kids needed a hug. They needed to be told, hey, I love you. So in the schools where they broke the curriculum, they started getting the best grades, the best behavior, the most, like they minimized the violence. And so I remembered all those stories, and it sounds like basically you're living it with Actin Academy, Apogee Strong. So where would you like to start to share? Is Actin Academy yours, or somebody else is kind of like the figurehead of it?
That's it's a good question, Alex. And I want to explain that structure, but I want to point out how important it is what you just said, how important what you were talking about, right? So we hear the terms alternative school.
Yes.
Right. Now, when we were growing up, alternative school meant one of two things. It meant either you have special needs and something's wrong,
right,
or you're one step away from juvenile hall, right?
Yes.
And you're about to go to jail. So that's the alternative school program. What we forget is, since the dawn of time, learning has been by doing. Right? You grew up, you were working on the farm, you were working on necessity, whatever that looked like. And maybe your dad was the welder in town. And so you were an apprentice underneath him, and you started going early, you started taking on early responsibility. You were part of this family unit, and you learned the things that were necessary to move forward. You learned your trade, you learned your business, right? That's how human beings learn. And I know you understand that. One of the things I love is that you talk about things like, okay, if you want to get really good at wrestling, you want to get your conditioning ready for wrestling, what do? You freaking wrestle.
Yeah.
Right? Ballet is cool. Basketball's cool. And those are both sports, and they require you to move your body. So is that what you do to get better at wrestling? Well, no, just because they're related doesn't mean it's the answer. You do the actual thing. Right? So these young people are learning responsibility by taking responsibility. They're learning to make choices by making choices, right? Like you're actually doing those things. So yeah, it's very similar to, and I can explain kind of how we do it with Actin. But Actin Academy is it's a global network. The best thing I can relate it to that people I think usually it allows them to get the picture is like CrossFit. And I mean in terms of a corporate structure. You can license the IP, And there's a big vetting process. So it's not a franchise where if you got the money, you're in, right? There's a vetting process. We had about 15,000 applications in to open an Actin, but we're only going to open, maybe a strong 1,000 across the globe.
Right.
So there's a vetting process. You can buy into the IP, and that just means you get all the projects, all of the collaborative efforts, all of the systems, all access to everybody in the network. You buy into that, but then you've got relative sovereignty and autonomy in how you run your campus, as long as you're adhering to the ideals of, look, we believe the students are heroes and geniuses, and we want them to be the ones driving the campus and making the decisions and ultimately running the campuses. And I don't mean running the campuses like Lord of the Flies. I mean running the campuses like a Fortune 500 company runs, but you have young people doing it. And I know people listen to that and go, that's cute, that's a dream. Come to my campus. Stanford University, UC Davis, UOP, they come to my campus, and I go, watch this. And I take the adults out of the room with a bunch of 5 and 6 year olds. And the 5 and 6 year olds will go, hey guys, 9 o'clock, time for the meeting to start. And they start shaking each other's hands, looking each other in the eye, and then launch themselves into a Socratic discussion. That's not an accident. Young people are super capable. And so that's one of our promises, is that we stay true to that understanding and that belief. So Jeff and Laura Sandifer started Actin Academy. They actually started the Actin MBA program first, and then launched the first K through 12. They never meant to expand. It just kind of happened organically where people wanted to do it. And so they'll call me for advice on stuff, and I'll call somebody in New Mexico, and they'll call somebody in China. We're all working together to try to do something better. And if I think of a project and I implement it and it works really well, I'll let every other campus around the world know, here's what I did, here's what worked, here's what sucked, here's what you might want to try. People can try it if they want or not. So it truly is a network of entrepreneurs trying to recreate or basically create, I guess I should say, a better model rather than trying to fix the school system as it is.
So a lot of questions here. So let me start with this. What do we call the teachers? Are they called teachers? Because the kids are called heroes and geniuses, which really can, as a kid, imagine like hearing that in your early days. Like, hey, heroes, geniuses, your early years really form, you interviewed Gary Vaynerchuk. He always says, thanks to my mom, I've got great self-esteem.
Right.
People if you don't get that in your early years, the way I've explained it in strength and conditioning is sometimes we don't train too many adults at my gym. But let's say I'm training, I remember a couple of years back training a guy who was prepping for the, not the police academy, but he was going to police academy for corrections.
Okay.
And even though he was like in his mid 40s, he was right on the last year of being able to go through it. He was still an insecure 12 or 13 year old, but his body was impressive. Ripped abs, big chest, big arms. And I said, like, if you don't develop the mind, you could still get older, and your mind has to get, somebody's got to kind of mentor you and help you cultivate that and be in the right environment. And it was really interesting speaking with him. It was no different than speaking with one of my 12 or 13 year old athletes who was kind of, mediocre in athletics and struggling with success.
Totally.
Same person, just, 3 times their age.
Totally, man. That mindset matters. People ask, well, what is the curriculum you use, to ensure that it's like, look, the curriculum is always a mindset. That's first and foremost, that's foundational, right? Self-confidence from actually having done something, right? We're not, saying, hey kid, you're a genius, and then letting them have a soft, easy life. Just like you don't go, hey kid, you're fully capable, and then don't ever make them actually work out because working out's too hard. Right. No, they get self-confidence because they actually do hard things. We put hard challenges in front of them, right? They get self-awareness because they try a number of different hard things, right? So those are the foundational things. The character matters, the work ethic matters, building resilience matters, learning to be calm in the midst of chaos matters, understanding how to prioritize your life and time management and finances and dealing with relationships and working with people that you love and working with people that you don't necessarily like. Those are all those things that actually matter going forward. So those are foundational to what we do. So we call them heroes and we call them geniuses because they are, but we also expect a ridiculously high level of performance. And by the way, when you expect it and the parents expect it, they meet it, and the self-confidence and self-awareness rise simultaneously. So the adults on campuses, we don't call us teachers because we're more like Morpheus, right? We call ourselves guides, because our job is to point their eyes to a different horizon. It's to maybe question and inspire and provide something that's sort of thought-provoking. And then we're opening a door, just like the Matrix. They got to walk through that door, right? They got to.
Is there a framework? Like, here's what kids age 5 are going to be doing in September and October. And then I guess the guides have freedom to, like, let's look at, you've got, I don't know how many kids you have. I've got 2 kids. I think my kids are a little
3.
older. You got 3, and they're what age range, Matt?
Mine are 5, 8, and 10. So
what does your 10-year-old like go through during the month of December at this Actin Academy?
Yeah, so she'll be in an elementary studio. So we call them studios, not classrooms, and they are mixed age groups, right? So the elementary studio is roughly, if you're comparing it to traditional school, your ages in there, the kids are anywhere from like what you would consider like second-ish grade up through probably like fifth-ish grade. So she's at the kind of older end of the elementary studio. She'll be going into the middle school studio, next year. Right now, their day, they come in at 9 o'clock. They'll start a morning meeting, and that morning meeting is run by them, where they first start out looking each other in the eye, standing up, shaking hands. They all have roles and responsibilities. It's a remember, this is an organization. It's a corporation. It's not a school. So they've got responsibilities. So my daughter is part of running that morning meeting. So she'll make sure everybody shakes hands and then go, okay, guys, here's our Socratic discussion for the morning, or we're going to go ahead and watch this TED Talk right here. And we're going to have a discussion around that. And the students have a framework of what a good conversation looks like. We call them the rules of engagement, and they will run that conversation. They'll have somebody in there who's keeping track of time. They'll have somebody in there who's keeping track of making sure people are concise and to the point. You'll have somebody in there who's a fact checker, who's, if somebody says something, they'll say, what's your evidence around that? Right? So the students all have their roles to make sure what happens is a very high level conversation. Those are the things that we show them, right? Those are the systems that we're putting in place. So they'll have that conversation, and then they'll go into their individual goals for the day. We have a proprietary software where they are plugging in their individual goals, and that's where they get to differentiate. So where some students maybe go, okay, I'm going to use Khan Academy right now because I'm working on some math right now, and so I'm going to kind of push forward on Khan Academy. You have other students that are going, okay, yeah, cool. I'm also doing math, but I'm taking a class through Stanford or through BYU. And I'm going to go ahead and do my class that way. My 10-year-old daughter, she doesn't like the traditional math classes. So she'll do more of an individual project where she'll have to put together a mock restaurant and literally source what would the food have to require, what would a space around here, if I was opening up a space here in Northern California, how much would that cost? And she might have to get on the phone and talk to a commercial realtor to find that out. And then she'll put together a mock P&L. That's math too.
That's amazing.
That's math that matters, right?
That's life.
That's life.
Yes.
So they'll have their individual parts in the mornings. Of course, it's broken up with plenty of play. That age needs play. So we'll do a section there. Then they'll go outside and go play. Sometimes it's an actual structured phys ed that, by the way, is put together by older students on campus. And then sometimes it is unstructured and they're just playing. And then in the lunchtime, they'll hang out, have lunch. Lunch, by the way, is cooked on site. It's all Weston A. Price approved food, and it's cooked by our 19-year-old chef and our middle school sous chefs who make delicious food, self-taught, and they make delicious, healthy food. So they'll make that. The students will go pick up their lunches made by other students, and then they'll go out and play. come back in the afternoon, and it's more, usually more around the collaborative time. So every session, which is like 5 or 6 weeks in length, they'll have a big project that they've got to take on. And they're going to have to collaborate in groups, sometimes just within their studio, sometimes with the whole school. And they've got to take on a big project, and we give them a general big outcome. And then it's up to them to figure out how to get there. And so we'll give little bits and pieces and nuggets in there to give them a little bit of background knowledge, but then they got to figure things out. And so they might be doing a 6-week quest on NASA. And at the end, we're going to have all the parents in the community there, and you're going to have to have designed a rocket and tested out different fuels. And then we're going to just have a competition, and you're going to shoot your rockets up. We're going to see who goes the furthest. You might have an electricity quest where you're going to learn all about electricity and what that means and how that works. But you're all going to work together to create and design a city. Some of it's going to be built out of cardboard. Some of it's going to be 3D printed. Some of it's going to be hammer and nails. You got to figure out how to put it all together, and you got to run electricity through the whole thing. And then when the parents get there, we're going to flip the switch, and do you have electricity that goes throughout your city? Right? We put big challenges in front of them, and they rise to the occasion. And it's a different discipline every 5 or 6 weeks for those big collaborative projects.
And then do they have, like after 5 or 6 weeks, do they have time off from the academy?
Yes,
or
sir.
How long?
Yes, sir. So a week or two. And so it creates kind of a modified year-round schedule. They go the same number of days that, they would go in a traditional environment. And again, I came out of the traditional. I was a public school teacher. I was a public school administrator. I was a private school teacher. So I know that whole game. Same amount of days. They come in and they go hard for 5 or 6 weeks, a little bit of a downtime, come in, new big project, still working on my individual stuff, go hard for 5 or 6 weeks, downtime for a week or two.
I like it. And do these kids go to college? Do they because that's quite traditional. And we've actually, I'm not a news follower, but through Instagram, you come across stuff and you see students realizing, I'm at we refinanced our house, I don't know, like a early COVID time. And the lady brought her son, who just graduated college with a teaching degree, but he was like close to 120 grand in debt. That's effing crazy.
It's bananas. It's bananas. And to think that parents are okay with that, but they wouldn't give their kids 100 grand to go start a business where real education. So you're not looking for real education. Most parents, you're looking for conformity. Most parents, you're looking to do what everybody says you always.
I don't know if I'd give my kid 100 grand to start a business unless he was in kind of like this environment surrounded by,
and he's got the right mentality,
other entrepreneurs. Yes.
But how dangerous is it for him to be 100 grand in debt and come out with no skills?
That's insane.
Because that's what's happening in college. So to speak to this real quick. So I worked at Stanford for a long time too. So I understand the education game, and I'm talking K through university, more than most people on this planet.
What did you do at Stanford? You were a adjunct, or?
I was corporate. I was actually a corporate trainer, and so I worked I worked all over the university, and I worked very closely with admissions for a long time too. So I understand that game of getting into
Stanford's
college.
Ivy League, correct?
Stanford, they're considered. They're not technically the Ivy League because they're not that East Coast, but they're one of the quote unquote elite colleges, which that's a
very
whole
difficult
conversation.
Yeah, very difficult to get into.
Very difficult to get into if you don't know how to play the game. If you know how to play the game, every college is easy to get into.
Wow.
And so that's what most people don't realize, right? So college, so I speak from experience on this. College is a game that is easy to get into if you know how to do it. So yes, our students, though we will never talk about college readiness ever, because it's a ridiculous arbitrary goal. Even though we don't focus on college entrance, our students will get in. That's the paradox. They'll get into any college they want. That's no problem. But they also will be able to articulate why they want to go if they want to go in the first place, right? So do our students go? Sure. If they want to, we have no problem getting into colleges. Many of our students have businesses that they're taking into perpetuity, or they're going other routes too. But college is an easy game to play. And then, I work with, we talked a little bit offline before on this too. I work with companies. I work with Fortune 500s all over the world. And they bring me in because they're going, hey, I've got all my college graduates that we've hired here, these 21 and 22-year-olds. Matt, they suck. We want to fire all of them, help them not suck. College didn't produce somebody that I want, but I don't know how else to do this, right? So we're in a weird spot that I'm trying to wake people up from.
Yeah, it's interesting because if I look at my experiences, these internships I had to go through as a teacher, sophomore year, junior year, senior year, our professors were really tough on us. I was in the health and phys ed route. A lot of people look
Yeah.
at phys ed teachers like they're kind of punch the clock people, but my, the cooperating teachers I worked with really pushed me. And I think
Yeah.
that's why when I taught, I started off with a bang. And I'll be honest, I've been around like these student teachers and
Yep.
they're so lazy. It's like they don't have this fire in them. And I just think, what did they experience coming up to that point? Probably nobody pushing them for
Totally.
greatness.
So first of all, huge props to my initial teaching credential was also phys ed, right? My degree is kinesiology. Those are some of the harder degrees to get, right? So props to your PE teachers, man. They're no dummies. Like we go through
Very tough. Yeah.
a lot of pre-med kind of stuff, that
Yes.
we go through, right? So
undergrad was tough.
very much so. So, but there's a couple things at play here. One, the game of college has changed in a lot of regards. And I want to be clear, I have nothing but respect for teachers and administrators in public arenas and university levels. I'm all for good humans who work hard, who do their job well, who have high expectations of the young people. There are still a lot of good people out there. So I don't discredit them. So I want people to hear that. But the universities have also been taken over by really a political ideology. And I'm not a political guy, but they've been taken over by a political ideology so that it has become more of an indoctrination center, so that standards have been lowered, so that students are afforded safe spaces, right? So that their ideas are not challenged, right? I did a movie with Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla a couple years ago called No Safe Spaces, right? It's on Amazon Prime right now.
Okay.
Check it out. It's on there for free. And it's about kind of what's going on here on the college campuses and the degradation of real education. It's becoming less and less allowed. So you've got that coupled with the fact that the same ideology has taken over a lot of our K through 12 teachers unions. So standards are continuously lowered here, right? So what we're doing is we are slowly, culturally lowering the bar on what it means to have anything. We're raising the entitlement that young people are feeling a lot of times to no fault of their own, and it's schooling and it's bad parenting trends, and it's pushing us in a tough spot as a nation, man. And I don't think people see exactly how that's being played, but it's scary.
No doubt about it. There was like I was telling you, I don't watch the news and I can't remember
Yeah.
where I came across it, but there were girls leaving West Point talking about how they thought this was going to be, this hardworking place, take pride in country.
Yep.
But I don't even know what it actually means. But they were talking about how professors at West Point were talking about like the woke thing, or
Totally.
what's woke mean? Like entitlement kind of thing.
It's I'm not, I guess I'm not there either, but it is more of a I'll say left. I don't want to say liberal because I have a lot of friends who would count themselves as liberal and that whatever, but more of a hard leftist kind of ideology, right? Like capitalism is the a downfall of society, and that everything's a patriarchy, and that if you want to identify as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, then everybody should tell you you're a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Correct.
And your feelings matter more than facts. And it's those kind of ideologies.
Right.
And yeah, those are taking over universities across the board.
Right. We, look, I grew up in a house, and just our era of growing up through the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
If you got a C in school, you got it because you earned it. You didn't do your homework. You didn't study. Right. No complaining was going to come and save you. And today, that's a lot of the thing is like people just want to complain about stuff versus go back and say, where did I screw up? Let me
That's
fix
right.
that. Let me take responsibility. And
Right.
also, thinking of like just all of the people that you've interviewed on the Essential 11 and listening to these young men asking questions. So when people start to listen, there is a very unique, like your young men stand apart. The
Yep.
way they speak, yes,
Yep.
sir, no, sir, thank you, sir. They're also
Yep.
legitimately thinking about
Yep.
the questions that they're asking,
That's right.
these people that you have. And you could tell that these young men are going to kick ass in life.
That's right. They're
Period. End of story. I could see it million miles away.
because they're owning it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to that personal responsibility. That is part of the Apogee program. That is part of our Actin academies. You need to take control of your education. You will be exactly where you want to be. You can join, a young man can walk in to Zach's gym, and it's legitimately one of the best gyms in the world, one of the best training minds, that the world has seen. And that's great. They can get super excited that they're there and they have that opportunity. But if they never go back and they never actually do the workouts, then nothing changes. Right. And that's the way we talk to our young people. It's that you've got to take responsibility on our campuses. Most campuses, you'll have your parent teacher conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have what we call hero reviews. And what that is it's the guide, the parent, and the young person. And the young person leads the meeting. They lead it going, here's what I need at home so that I can be pushed. Here's what I need on campus so that I can be pushed, right? That character, that personal responsibility matters. Otherwise, you're not going to be a part of either of these programs. That's why they're different.
I love it. Now, the program that you're partnered with Tim Kennedy, you have a school in Austin. Is that Actin or is that Apogee Strong? That's
So
okay.
Tim confused a lot. I love that guy. He confused a lot of people because so he and I developed Apogee Strong, the mentorship program, which is virtual and global right there. And then he said afterwards, he goes, hey, I also want to open one of these Actin academies. And I'm like, cool, man, let me help you get rolling. Right. So we got an Actin academy up, and then he named it Apogee Cedar Park and Actin Academy. So he confused a lot of people just with the co-naming, but that school right there is an Actin Academy. It's just called Apogee Cedar Park. And then, Apogee Strong is our mentorship program.
And so how do we find locations of Actin Academy? Just Google, I'm sure.
Yeah, you just go to actinacademy.org and there is a search function there. There's literally a search function in the bar, and you can look for where they're located or where one is getting up and running.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah.
So I was listening, talking about your podcast. You were talking about your kids. I think you guys have a farm. I'm not sure if you're live on the farm or you have the property off, but talking about how like your kids each have these jobs to do. And, when young people have responsibility, they do take pride in stuff. And ironically, the world we're in now is like, we're trying to, everything is, people are taking that stuff away from the kids. Like, even I look at things like the electric bike. When I was a kid, I rode through multiple towns.
That's right.
12 hours a day. Yeah. And it's like everything keeps going easy. And just of that, like, have you spoken with Joe DeSena of Spartan? If not, I got to introduce you guys. Have you guys chatted?
I've not spoken with Joe. I know he just did a podcast with our mutual friend Ryan Bickler, right? But
I got to introduce you guys.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe and I, when we first met, we were kind of like disappointed in schools and things and that. He's like, let's open a Spartan school. He's like, we'll do it together. And it's why it's so interesting is hearing, now knowing about Actin Academy.
Well, Frizella just they want to do one maybe at First Form, get an Actin down there too. So I'm talking with them this week about getting one
he's
too.
Got the massive property there.
Yep.
And so it seems like, entrepreneurs, you essentially said, are the ones, I think about this. Let's just talk about money here. So I like to be transparent with people. So
Yep.
I work in a school district where the previous school district I was in, there was very big jumps in the pay scale.
Yep.
That stuff has changed in a lot of states and towns. They changed it. The teachers union, the teachers that were older than us who are now retired, they fought for like really strong pay raise. So now every year at the school district I'm in is a $500 per year pay raise. So you have a 10-month school year. So you're
Yep.
getting paid $50 a month,
Yep.
$12 and something cents a week extra, right?
Right.
So I think to myself, talking about money, as I've gotten busy with family, I kind of didn't connect with some of my friends that I used to see. So a buddy and I, we do seminars together like every, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months. And it's a way for us to hang out together. But then in a day, we earn 3 or 4 grand. And it's like kind of funny because it's like, I'll get $500 a year just playing the game, or I can take shit into my own hands and create and inspire others and create things that is an exchange of value. Like your recent guest, Steve. What was Steve's last name? I'm not sure how long ago. He works in the Squire program with Beaudreau.
Steve Eckert. Yeah.
Not Eckert. It was a recent, the guy
so we had Matt Schneider on recent.
That was him. My bad.
Matt. Matt. Yeah.
It was Matt Schneider. So
Matt
was
Schneider
talking about, let's see if I could find it on my.
Those guys are great. All those guys.
Yeah, I know those guys. They're awesome. So Matt was talking about, like coaching other coaches and how they feel good. He didn't say spending or buying. He just said it's an exchange. They invest in my coaching, and in turn, they get this 10, 20, 100 times return of investment in that year.
That's right.
So you don't think that way. And people our age, Matt, you're in your 40s. So a lot of my listeners are in their 40s. We were not really encouraged, not too many in our generation, to be an entrepreneur. Gary Vee is our age. So, and by the way, Gary and I grew up in the same town. He grew up on the north end of town. But he says, early days, somebody said entrepreneur. The first thing people thought was like loser. Yeah, that guy's an idiot. He's like doing weird, sketchy things. Our parents would say, get the job, get the pension, get the this. But let me tell you, I've been in and out of teaching. I've been in the universities, and there is no security at all. There really is security.
Not. It's an illusion of security.
You must count on yourself. And listen, running a business is not easy. Especially there's a lot of competition out there. But it's really the way, in my mind, to give you the ultimate security. Now, I'm still in the schools, and really, even when I'm out of the schools, I'm still working with that same age group. So I always see myself as this teacher, coach. You're at Actin Academy, you call it a guide. If you ever read or listened to Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, he talks about what is your unique ability? What's like the one thing that will excite you forever, that it's just you're great at that. For me, I'm very, very good at working with that kind of younger generation, but then in a strange sort of way, I could also take that and implement it to men our age, teaching them how strength can impact life. So it's, when I look at this landscape of life, there are, I guess, careers that might offer you stability and whatnot. But I think what we've seen these past few years in the world is that the world is so unstable, and the workplace, it's really, it's scary. So if you want to minimize your scariness, you have to find out what you're great at. You have to create something that gives value. And I always say minimum effective doses, you have to change lives. So does your work change lives? And then people will pay you for it. Money is an exchange for the value you give.
That's right. The world, like you said, the world is unstable. It's unpredictable. We don't know, right now we're sitting here talking on these devices that in
Right.
10 years from now are probably as good as freaking pagers, right?
Mm,
So if we can't mentally wrap our heads around that and go, okay, not only do I need to learn whatever the new technology is, I need to unlearn and detach from this old stuff, right? If I don't have that mindset. So yeah, the world's unpredictable. So what you need to be able to be to have as predictable is you. I know, as crazy as the world gets, I know I control between here and here,
yes.
right there. My mentality between these two ears, I control it. I
Yeah.
control the calmness that's there. I've got the self-confidence that I'm going to figure it out, and I'm going to pay. And it's because I have confidence in that I'm free in ways that many people are not free. Because I will take the ultimate responsibility, because I'm not going to have an illusion of responsibility. You're right. We grew up, parents, go to college, man. Go to college, get your job,
Oh
get your
yeah.
401k, get your,
Go to
and by the,
college.
go to college.
If
And
you don't
by
go
the
to
way,
college, you will you'll die.
you're never
You'll be
gonna,
a
yeah, man.
loser.
You're never gonna amount to anything, right?
Yeah.
And that generation still thinks like that, even, but some of them are starting to wake up and figure it out now. I've got some people now that were, teachers of mine growing up, or my own parents maybe, were just going, hey, I'm losing money in the 401k. I don't really know this retirement thing. I'm not really sure I'm going to be stable. What are you doing? God, you didn't do any of that, but you're going to be okay no matter what, because you did this, and this. Interesting. They weren't saying it because they wanted to give you bad advice. They were just saying it because that's what they really thought was going to help you. It's just not true. You've got to be willing to take on personal responsibility and figure out how, like you said, how are you going to change lives and provide value and be an asset, and pay attention to what's actually going on. Live your life based on what's going on, and parent based on what's going on, not on what you wish was going on
Right.
or what used to go on. And that's what people do. They get stuck in those ruts versus paying attention to how things actually are.
Yeah, well, not to harp on Gary V, but I remember a long time ago, he was telling entrepreneurs a long time ago, he said, don't be romantic about how you
That's
used
right.
to do things.
Yep.
Like, oh, I always made my money doing ABC. Well, look, that, like you said, 10 years from now, Zoom might not at all be a
Sure.
thing. It'll be a VR type thing. And so you must adapt. And our mutual friend Bedros was really,
Yep.
fitness industry. He started getting some guest speakers in the military space. I saw him getting inspired by them, wheels
Yep.
turning. Then he creates the Squire program
That's
to
right.
fill a void of what these young men, young teenage men, are, or right preteens are missing.
That's
And
right.
so that's how you have to think. We're definitely going to crush a part two, but let me ask you this question, Matt. You mentioned some of the work that some of the teenagers are doing in the Actin Academy. They're
Yeah.
chefs. What are some of the categories of work they're moving into when they graduate as entrepreneurs? What are they
Yeah.
doing?
It's cool, man. This is where it gets fun, because we've now had so many young people that have come through the program at this point that there's a bunch of stories to share now, right? So it's great. So I'm just trying to think, even just on my own campuses, we got one that came in deathly afraid of public speaking, who is now a paid motivational speaker, TEDx speaker. We've got a young lady who has got her custom artwork that she does on skateboards and snowboards. She has them in 6 storefronts here in the Sacramento area. She just sold a skateboard to Tony Hawk. She just got commissioned to do a car. Yeah, she's crushing, dude. She's 16.
16.
Yep. We've got a young lady who, I think she's probably 19 or 20 now, but when she came out and graduated a couple years ago, her nonprofit business that was around clean well water was already making 7 figures as she came out of high school. We had a young girl who had a clothing brand that she started and now works for Donna Karen. We've got, I got a young man on campus right now who's 15, and he's in negotiations on 150 acres out here because he's going to create a bike park, a downhill mountain bike park. I mean, we've got a young guy that was working for Yahoo at 17 and was making $100,000 while he was finishing up college.
What was he
He was
doing?
creating some sort of animated video product for one of their verticals. And it's out of my talk about the unique genius. I don't understand what he was doing, to be honest. I don't have to. Whatever, I don't have to. So, you got him doing that. We got a young man who's doing woodwork and creates custom cornhole boards, custom pallet, American flags, and custom bike ramps. And he's got his woodwork materials and a bunch of, we have middle school girls with their jewelry line in jewelry stores locally. I mean, you name it, they're doing it, and you mentioned us being on a ranch, man, out here. I got a ranch in California. We're actually moving to a bigger farm in North Carolina. And we have this ranch because we have horses. We have horses because my daughters wanted horses. And it wasn't daddy that went, okay, daddy will get you horses. My girls started businesses and made money and bought horses.
What were they doing what was their business?
So their main business that they made the majority of the money on was they put together a virtual cookbook that they ended up selling all over the world. And so they made a ton of money on that. But then they also were doing digital marketing.
Like
a virtual. So it was a digital cookbook, just a digital cookbook. And they went to young people in multiple countries and had the young people give them their favorite recipes and pictures of them cooking it. So it's this whole kids cooking cookbook from kids all over the world. And they compiled this digital cookbook and sold that. So they made a bunch of money on that.
Where did they sell it on? What platform?
They were selling it on, they were utilizing people's email lists. Like, here's the benefit of being a young person. They could literally go to all the other entrepreneurs just on campus and go, hey, would you send this out to your email list for me? And there's 7. And so everybody's gonna be like, yeah, of course, man. Right. And then that person who's an entrepreneur who has, 200,000 people on their email list goes, hey, look at what these cool kids are doing. Here you go. Right. They're taking advantage of being young.
Right. Adults overthink stuff. We overthink.
Always overthink and overcomplicate.
Yeah. And then you lose creativity in that whole process.
That's right.
Of overthinking things.
Because we get trained to be afraid.
I actually was, some of the kids I used to work with at Rutgers, I was saying to some of my friends, I go, it's interesting. Some of them go and get a quote unquote real job, but a lot of them are like, they don't sweat it. Like, one kid started a food truck, but he also coaches wrestling. Another kid started making video editing. So he goes to sporting events and does the videos or the highlights and then edits. And that's how he makes money. They're not like, hey, I'm only going to make money one way. And so why am I calling him Steve? Who was the last guy on the podcast?
Matt Schneider.
Matt. So Matt said to one of your young men, you always need at least 3 sources of income, multiple streams of income. So I was like, these kids coming out of the college, Rutgers is a great school, but it's like, they're not actually implementing their degree. They kind of went to college to wrestle, and then they're taking their hobby and making a business out of it. It's pretty cool.
That's really cool. And and the reality is, the earlier we can get young people thinking that way, what they start doing is they start collecting these experiences. And within these experiences, you start seeing multiple opportunities of, I could do that here. I could do that here. It doesn't mean you're going to do that for the rest of your life, but maybe that spurs on, you start making a little bit of money. That spurs on another idea that you then kind of go, okay, I'm going to go this way. Right. And then all the while, you're also creating a network because you're meeting different people.
Network
doing
is
that.
Huge.
It's humongous. Right. And so my kids already at 10, 8, and 5, their network, their list of experiences that they've taken on, it rivals most adults. The sky's the limit for them.
I was saying to my, so I have one class at this school. What it was initially supposed to be, which it was before COVID, was I pull the kids out of phys ed, strength and conditioning. After COVID, they're like, all right, we're not doing that. So during this health class, I got COVID the week before and the week of Thanksgiving. And I said, I would have been in really rough shape if I didn't have a good network. So I was able to
Yeah.
reach out to a friend of mine who's a doctor, who's been
Yep.
around and works with athletes for decades. And he said, okay, this place didn't prescribe you XYZ. I said, no. They said, ride it out. He said,
Yeah.
I go to the ER. I said, they want to give me this. Yes. He said, yes, take it. I the next day he goes, did they prescribe you this? I said, no, they didn't. He goes, give me your pharmacy name. He did it. And I told him, if you don't have a network of people to help
That's
you,
right.
I go, my COVID experience was very bad. It could have been 20 times worse. So you
Yep.
need somebody who you can help you with. Let's say this person's an accountant. Who does
That's
that?
right.
Let's say a family member has cancer. Who's your doctor who's in your network that
That's
really
right.
knows how to crush cancer?
That's
And
right.
so that's what I do with everything's like a project, research, present, but they
That's
have
right.
to apply it. And
Yeah.
is it perfect? But you got to get out of the books and you got to think and you got to be in situations where like you got your back against the wall a little bit or a lot,
That's
actually.
that's right. You absolutely do. And all of that starts the network, the having those opportunities. It all starts with taking action, right? Being an action oriented, sitting around waiting for things to happen is the worst case scenario. And I'm trying to, as you're talking about some of this stuff, I was going backwards a little bit because that network,
Tim
the
Ferriss
development
always
of the
says
network,
your network is your net worth. Tim Ferriss
it's
says
so
that.
it's so true, man. It's so true. I feel like at this point I'm one phone call away from almost anybody on the planet. But I go back to, okay, I started a school. Because I started a school, I got this guy Danny Vega reached out to me. I don't know if you know Danny or not, but he's a great guy.
Danny Vega is
Fat Fueled Family, and him and his wife Maura.
what family you said?
They have a Fat Fueled Family. That's kind of their Instagram. So here's why you might know him though. So Danny was good buddies with Jay Ferrugia, who I'd followed Jay's work and your
Okay,
work
yeah, I
for a
know
long
Jay.
time, right?
Yeah.
So Danny introduces me to Jay. I talk to Jay, get to trying to provide some value to Jay. I bring Jay on the podcast. Jay's like, "Do you know my guy Beaudreau?" I'm like, "I know who it is, but I don't know him." He's like, "Let me introduce you." Beaudreau and I get on the phone, right? And so all of these things, you start to develop all these relationships. Next thing you know, last week we're in Mexico, and I'm spending the whole week with Bedros and Ray Kerr and Ryan Mickler and Tanner and Jack Donovan, and we're putting together a massive event to go forward and make more impact here in 2022. And it's just none, and all of that starts because I decided to take action and open a school. Really, if you go back to the foundation of it, it's because I took action in one thing, all of these other things happened. Right. And that's true for every area of life. That's why we tell our kids, that's why we tell the kids at the school, make sure you're always the nicest person in the room. You got the character to go forward and meet somebody, and you present yourself well, but meet as many people as you can, do as much for other people as you can, collect as many experiences as you can, because all of those are going to have a compounding effect going forward. All of them.
Yeah. We had this, that was like a conversation I had with my students is like, what, if you're going to gift somebody with something, are you going to get them a shirt?
Yeah.
What do we remember more?
Yeah.
Things or experiences. So somebody's like,
Yeah.
I think I'll get somebody concert tickets, or I think I'll go whitewater rafting with them. I was like, you'll always remember
That's
experiences over a thing that you did. And so I went through a phase of saying no to a lot of opportunities, and now I'm back to saying yes to more, probably because I'm going through that like midlife where I'm like, damn, dude, this goes fast. Like this ride don't last forever.
It goes quick, brother. I know, man. I know. And it's a hard balance, but it's so important, man, to put yourself out there and get those experiences.
Yeah, it is. Especially I think when men become, you get married, you have kids, you feel bad when you leave, but then you realize I come back a better man, a better husband, because I got this experience. And so
That's right.
Important.
It is important. And it also allows you, if you're telling your young people that you're raising, you're telling the kids that you're charged with raising in your home, hey, follow your dreams. Hey, get after it. Hey, go work hard. Hey, go. But then you're not doing it. That's a hypocrite, and they'll see it.
dude, that's what got me to step away from teaching when I was maxed out at almost 100
Yeah.
grand.
Yeah.
And I remember
Yeah.
saying, it was like a nightmare. I was like, what if my daughter will be older and I'm telling her, you got to do this, you got to do that. And then she was going to be like, what the hell are you telling me what to do? You've done nothing. You played it safe.
Right.
You live and grew up in the same town. You never left that job. You're a chicken shit. And so I was like, I got to show and not, yeah. And so
that's it.
Yeah.
That's
so
it, dude. Your kids will do what you do before they do what you say.
100%. That is a truth bomb, my bro. So Matt, for the listeners, we've got the Essential 11 podcast. Where else should our listeners go? This will also be a video, but and I'll include links in the show notes, but we've got apogeestrong.com. Who is that for?
apogeestrong.com. So that's for young men ages 12 to 22 is kind of our range right now. And so
parents are signing them up.
Parents are signing them up. For the most part, parents are signing them up. So it's a year-long mentorship program. We've got a part 2 coming out that Beaudreau and Mickler are helping me launch as well. So that'll come out here in 2022. That's going to be for a post high school kind of young man. So Apogee Strong, the Essential 11, and then I'm active just under my name, mostly on Instagram, and I field hundreds of questions a week around parenting, around education. I'm always glad to help, man. Whatever I can do, people are more than welcome to reach out there, and I'm glad to chat.
Yeah, I will link all that up in the show notes and on the website over at zachevanesh.com. And then Actin Academy, what was it? actinacademy.org.
Yeah,
and then they can search for a location.
Search for location, or if they're an entrepreneur that wants to get at it in their community and want to talk about, I'm glad to help people open. I don't get paid for that. It's just a mission. So I'm glad to help people open one.
I've seen you
if there's not one near them too. So,
I've seen you sharing that a lot on the social lately. So for all of my listeners, our listeners, those of you that are watching, we appreciate you so much. Share this episode. I think that's the best way. Give Matt a follow. Like I said, we connected 2 months ago. And sometimes when I connect with somebody, I'm like, man, I wish I connected with this guy 12 years ago, not just 2 months ago. And so that is the positive power of social media is you can connect. Matt lives in Cali. I'm here in New Jersey on the East Coast. And this is a way, building networks. We're going to have to do a part 2. So everybody, thank you again. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Matt, just hang tight while I shut this down.
Yes, sir.